Okay, good morning once again. And once again, you're very welcome to today's Meta Chat. For those of you who are here for the first time, we are glad that you joined us. And we do hope that over the next hour, we would be able to trigger some conversations in your mind around digital banking, around infrastructure, and how you're thinking about 2023. So once again, you are very, very welcome. So with me on the chat today would be Benga Moloko. He's the Managing Director of BFD Microfinance Bank, and my colleague Ogo Owuzurike, who is Sales Director for Africa. So ultimately, we also want to remind you that you have the opportunity to participate with us. There's a chat button at the bottom of your screen. Also, if you have questions and questions rather, you can also put them in the question section, and we would find the way to take as many as possible in the time that we have. So again, we're so excited to have you here for us at MetaMap. We're very passionate about enabling borderless growth. I think for us, it's important that everybody across the world has the opportunity to access services, access products, and it starts from being able to verify who they are. And that's a problem that we seek to solve in Africa and across the world. So once again, we're happy that you're participating with us. And the theme, like you may already know, is actionable insights to improving digital banking infrastructure in 2023. And I know most of you, if not everyone, have been part of some type of strategy conversation at your organizations in the past couple of weeks, thinking about how 2023 will pan out. And if you're in countries like Nigeria that have significant events like elections coming up, some of those things are obviously in your mind and how you would respond to them. I think for us, it's important that we know that business will go on and we need to be ready to grab or seize the day, particularly around opportunities that would always present themselves to us. Be that as it may, we would go on with this conversation and I will jump right into it and we'll start with having a nice, I call it a fireside conversation with Benga Omolokum. And Benga, like I said earlier, he's the managing director of VFD Microfinance Bank with many, many years of experience across business process improvement, general management, technology, and strategy. One thing that really strikes me in his experience is how he's skilled in establishing and scaling new businesses and ventures. Prior to his current role as the MD of VFD Microfinance Bank, he served as the executive director and COO of VFD Group PLC, and currently serves as a non-executive director across multiple companies, including some SEC-regulated companies. So once again, you're very welcome, Benga. We're happy to have you on this Meta Chat.
Thanks, DG. Happy to be here.
Super, super. Like I said, we'll just dive right into it. And you are clearly a player. You are right in there in digital banking and what is going on in Nigeria and Africa. And there's been a lot of growth. And if I think about it, even some organizations here on the call have had to either create a digital transformation strategy, maybe some cases a new subsidiary, in some cases a new line of business for digital banking. And there's been a lot of growth. And some people think or say that perhaps in Africa, the growth has been faster than other parts of the world. So we're going to get your thoughts, Benga, about this current state of the ecosystem. How do you think the growth has really panned out? Is it as great as people say it is? And what are your thoughts around where it is going, where the industry is going, and how we can think about opportunities for growth?
Okay, so I would say because we have a lot of deficits in Africa in general, right? I would say yes, it's fast growing, but most of the Western countries are already really stable. So you can't really say it's growing faster than the Western countries because they've already achieved stability. So most of their payment infrastructure, most of their banking infrastructure has already achieved a level of maturity that we're trying to aspire to get to. So I wouldn't necessarily agree that we're doing better than the West. Yes, we have some services that happened faster here, or we achieved faster here. So instant payment, for example, happened really quickly within Africa in general, and then most of the Western countries. And it's something that is starting to come into play in Western countries where you can actually pay instantly, and the merchant receives money, or you can transfer money directly from one person to the other. But to a large extent, it probably wasn't an issue for them relative to us. We're a low trust society typically. So there's nothing faster than cash in terms of value transfer. So if anybody building anything digitally wanted people to move from cash to digital side of things, then you needed to build something that was literally just as fast as cash, which is where you see service like M-Pesa, the instant bank transfer services both in Nigeria and Ghana, even mobile money as well, which is now becoming more prevalent and telco-led. So these infrastructure actually, to a large extent, when you think about it, mimic the speed of cash. And I think that's where you can say, we've done much better than the Western societies. But they've caught up very quickly. They've caught up again. That speaks to the maturity of their systems as well.
Yeah, I think you raised a very interesting point about trust. And like rightly said, cash is always the most important thing that people trust. Is I see the money for hand, like they say, back for ground, right? And instant payment helps to bridge that gap. But again, we are used to that. That's yesterday's news, right? So in terms of opportunities, would you say that trust is a competitive advantage? And how do you think that a company institution can seize that as a way to get more customers comfortable to work with them?
Well, I mean, every issue is an opportunity when you think about it, right? If a lot of people have trust issues with certain things, it means there's a huge opportunity to build something entirely different, right? And I think you would see that even in Nigeria, right? And even generally in Africa, right? So yes, the telco-led model, mobile money has come. It's way more prevalent in a lot of other African countries like Ghana, East Africa as well. In Nigeria, I'll say it's just starting out, right? The banking infrastructure is a lot more prevalent on the Nigerian end. So now speaking about trust, like remember in 2009, 2010, if you walked to any store, well, to most stores, and using Nigeria as an example, and you wanted to pay with your card, they'll tell you no. You could see the POS machine there, but they'll tell you, well, it's not working. It's probably working, but they tell you it's not working, right? Please pay cash. Because for the merchants, he couldn't understand why he had to pay a small merchant service charge for the same service he was getting full charge for. And he was getting the money instantly in cash. But with the POS machine, he was getting the money the next day. And he was getting it short of a few pennies. So he's like, why do I want to trust this system? So that was a huge issue then. Look at it today. You have people in the villages using POS machines for agency banking. Agency banking, in my opinion, is easily one of the most important innovations in the last 10 years, right? It's taking people from who didn't trust banks, who didn't trust financial services, people wearing suit and tie, coming with your fancy gadgets, your ATM machines. It's taking those people who didn't trust that system at all to people that are now used to it, is now part of their everyday lives. It's the agent is a mini banker that these individuals can relate with. So that's look at what happened there. It was a low trust society. Some guys came up with this innovative agency banking idea, figured out a different way to actually repackage what existed in a manner that people could actually relate to it. Now the agent is my cousin, right? He's not that faceless, nameless banker that I don't know. He's my cousin. I can give him cash, and I can be sure that he'll help me pay my DSTV bills, or he'll help me buy credits, or he would help me transfer it to my child who is in school, right? And you can see this exact same thing happening in so many African countries, right? I mean, even in Ghana, mobile money didn't exist. It wasn't as prevalent, even 5-6 years ago, right? If you came in, there weren't that many POS machines across board. You had to go to an ATM, withdraw cash, and spend cash. Now, even the woman on the side of the street would say, this is my, send it to me using Momo, right? And you then have people who have now created businesses around this, Momo agents here and there that can receive cash and then load it on your wallet and give you access to things that you didn't have access to. So the low trust has created significant business opportunities, which has also not just created jobs, it's also created additional economic activity. And I think the area that we typically like to discount, and if you look at it more from an economic perspective, cash is largely in the gray economy, right? It's very difficult to determine the amount of transaction activity happening with cash. For governments, it's difficult to tax, things like that. But once you start moving to these digital sectors, it's actually now adding to real economic output, right? It's now adding to activity that can actually be taxed, where you and I can then benefit from. So yeah, I think these things lead to significant opportunities, which we've seen today. Sorry, did you muted?
Thank you. So I was just saying that was a fantastic example about agency banking, because ultimately it's about bringing digital banking to the doorstep of the customer, right? Exactly tailored to what they want and how they want it, and of course off the back of a steady infrastructure. If I go on quickly, right, there's a trend, I guess, again based on who you ask, that a lot of the more established financial institutions, like I mentioned earlier, a couple of years ago, most larger institutions created digital banking or transformation teams or subsidiaries. There's that thought process that some of those more established institutions are trying to get fintech licenses, trying to get fintech subsidiaries to maybe enjoy some flexibility. And on the other hand, maybe the more fintech companies are trying to become banks, right? Getting banking licenses, and it becomes what side is the winning side, right? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it is true one, or do you think this trend would be sustained, or everybody has their role to play in the value chain?
So I think it's really interesting, right? I think it's one of those times when everything is in a state of flux. If you recall, in the 90s, we had what we called armchair banking, right? Where technically the banks were doing you a favor. So when you went to a bank, I, as a bank manager, I was God, right? I could say, no, do this. The dynamics were different. Then we then had the new generation banks come in, and I think this kind of transformation would also have occurred, across Africa, right? Where you then had like a new kind of bank where these guys now went to meet you to actually canvass and solicit for your business, right? I think we're in that phase where things are also changing again. Prior to now, and when I say now, in the last, 5 years thereabouts, technology was very, very expensive, right? So it was a huge barrier to financial services or banking in general. So you had to be able to spend a certain kind of money to actually do anything in financial services. Today, with Facebook, with Twitter, all of these things, like, technology is more ubiquitous, it's more accessible. A core banking system for a bank, for example, today is no longer built by just big majors, right? You now have smaller, more affordable core banking systems. I mean, you even have free core banking solutions. 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. Not that they didn't exist 5 years ago, but they weren't as sophisticated as they are now, right? You could always find these free things, but they were very limited. Today, even the free ones are very, very sophisticated, and the process of even setting it up yourself is actually easier, right? So I think it's interesting for two reasons, right? One, I think with the advent of fintechs, it's now forcing traditional banks to rethink about their processes. They were used to doing things a certain way. You now have these smaller players who are more nimble, that can actually do things, the exact same thing, literally the exact same thing, faster, with more flexibility than some of the existing banks. So the banks chasing these fintech licenses, well, not licenses, or setting up fintech entities, to a large extent, I think it's to skirt that innovation gap, right? So there's a huge innovation gap in banks. You can anything a fintech is talking about, any sophisticated or different way of processing a transaction, looking at a customer, advancing credit. I can bet you, if you have a one-on-one conversation with most senior personnel in banks, they get it, they understand it, they absolutely agree with it. It's something they absolutely want to do. But the organization is so large that no matter where you are, whether you're sitting on the top, it's a very Herculean task to change that entire organization. So in some instances, it's easier to set up a company that can help you with that innovation, still keep you within the banking ecosystem, but is free of the burden of the existing institution. So to a large extent, I think it makes sense. That's what they're doing. Ultimately, the customer wins because it means that the bank then starts to get more innovative, right? They have a larger balance sheet. These are things that they can do. Secondly, on the fintech side, what the fintechs are looking for is legitimacy, right? Which is what a license gives you. I think for the guys that are looking for licenses, it tells you the seriousness with which they've now started going into this thing. And let's be fair, not everybody needs a license, right? And not everybody even wants a license. Some would rather focus on a niche area and partner with a license holder, which some fintechs, VBank inclusive, starting to do. We provide support to people who, we don't want a license. You're a licensed entity. We would like to partner with you. Focus on what it is we want to focus on, which is niche, which is maybe narrow, and continue doing what it is that we're doing. For the bigger banks, what the fintechs also bring is innovation, right? Again, remember, they forced the banks to think about these things differently. Opening an account on your phone directly without having somebody come physically to the bank branch was pioneered by fintechs, right? Now banks are now looking into it. A lot of the transaction banking processing, it existed before. Let's be factual, right? There were other larger, more established, I'll still say fintechs, right, that already had some of these things. But because at the time, I would also say technology was not that ubiquitous, right? Only a few people could actually connect, and they were tied to established processes. Today, you have more innovative payment service providers that have also simplified this process. They've taken that very complicated process, complicated sign-up process, which you even had to pay for, right? So I want to run my transactions through you. I still have to pay you to connect to you, right? They've taken that and they've said, look, let's make this a lot easier, right? So, I mean, just to to bring everything full circle, the bigger banks need this sort of structures to spur innovation. Otherwise, you know what, the market moves, right? And I think the term digital banking is a misnomer because at the end of the day, what are we going to do? Is it paper and pencil banking, right? It's we're not going back to that. We're not going back to that tally system that, oh, number three, come physically. I think it's a misnomer. You're going to be dealing with millions of customers, processing millions of transactions, looking at millions of requests. You have to do it digitally, right? It's just impossible for a lot of people to sit down and hold a lot of context in their mind. So it's a misnomer. It's the way. That's one. For the fintechs, it's the legitimacy it brings, right? There are so many threats in the markets today. There are so many issues. How do I differentiate between somebody running an MMM scheme and someone who is actually running, a legitimate scheme? The best thing is the license, right? Because it then tells you that there's somebody with a big stake that can come to your aid in the event that this person misbehaves, right? So I think it's the right step. I think it forced some level of innovation. And for me, the most important thing is even the experimentation. Not a lot, not some of these fintech ideas or some of these new age ideas might fail. I mean, today we're questioning with the FTX crash, where everybody's now suddenly questioning cryptocurrency, right? And even beyond that, I saw an article yesterday when someone was even questioning blockchain technology, right? So some of these things, yes, would be experiments that would not proceed. But I think why they're important is it opens people's minds to what can be possible, right? Someone will pick that exact same thing up tomorrow and apply it entirely in a totally different manner. Today, we're used to unlocking your phone with your face, right? Um, but that same technology is now used in financial services, in banking, in identity management, right? It's called the liveness check. So how do I know that you are real? How do I know that you are you, right? And this is also helping with other things around risks, right? So those things I think would continue to evolve. The banks will continue to absorb them. The fintechs are more nimble. They will continue to experiment, and the more serious ones would also start to get more legitimacy as they grow, which is where the license comes into play.
Got it. You mentioned so many valid and important points, and it goes to lead me to my next question. So, for example, you talked about effectively democratizing infrastructure, right? So people can just literally off the shelf get solutions that will help them with things that you typically had to invest so much money many years ago to achieve. You talked about partnerships, right? Because ultimately, you talked about the partner with some fintechs to be able to achieve certain objectives. So, on your last point about risks and the liveness check example you gave, what are your thoughts around? I'm going to kind of merge two or three questions together, right? In terms of the challenges or risks that innovation brings, right, or new terrains bring, how big do you think these risks are? One, then two, how important is the right infrastructure? For example, like you said, the liveness check being one, the other points around digital KYC. What are your thoughts around the risks? One, then two, the infrastructure that can help in some cases mitigate or at least reduce these risks as much as possible.
Okay, so let me start with infrastructure, right? I think this is where, in general, within Africa, we have significant deficits, right? In the West or in the more developed economies, you have stable infrastructure. You have the MasterCard rails, you have the Visa card rails, on which a lot of their banking and payment services, run on. So you're very sure that if I go to a store, or if I go to an ATM machine, the chances that there will be a failure is low, right? Today on Twitter in Nigeria, using Nigeria as an example, you see people say, well, I have to have at least 3 or 4 bank cards because, or in fact, before you eat, just pay so that you don't get disgraced or you don't wash plates, right? So again, there's no trust because there are issues. And all of these things are dependent on infrastructure, which also now speak to the risks, right? We've built so fast, and the market is so complicated from a technology perspective. You're building, I'm building, I don't know what you're building, you don't know what I'm building, but we're connecting together in any case. And any ripple, any issue or glitch on my own infrastructure has a ripple effect, right, on a lot of the people that are connected to me or are dependent on me, right? And you see this in so many instances. And we're in such a unique time, right, where, yes, there was a technology boom. Well, I don't know if it's a bust now, but there was a technology boom, right? And you had so many people building so many things at the exact same time. And some of these people are leaving. These people are leaving to these Western economies or leaving from one organization to another, right? And again, because that stability, to be honest, hasn't really been formed. We're still in that state of flux where we're figuring out what's happening. Everybody's trying to build and catch up very quickly and also trying to stabilize things a bit, right? So in that state, people who have built certain things, who have left, somebody is now taking over, doesn't necessarily have the right context of what has been done. There are also scenarios of poor documentation. So even that succession framework isn't quite there, right? So this leads to a lot of infrastructure stability, right? And then you have the bad actors. So again, so I've talked about the infrastructure, and I'm now telling you where the risks, come into play, right? You then have bad actors, right? So people have left. Yes, your infrastructure might be unstable, might be wonky. You're trying to, put things together, maybe holding things with sellotape and prayers and all of that, let this thing not happen so everything doesn't fall apart. And that's the good scenario. You then have scenarios where that chap that has left is a bad actor, right? Who now has wrong or illicit access back into this infrastructure. So these are some of the things that are really happening. And you then have bad market actors as well that are now taking advantage of these things, right? I know we're talking about financial inclusion a lot these days, right? And how technology and digital banking supports and even helps enhance financial inclusion. And in this same conversation, there are people that are now posing as financially excluded people, and now using those channels to actually, take advantage of these existing systems and, wreak havoc on people. You now have people that are, again, forget about the regulation side, the unregulated people who are now mimicking the more legitimate fintechs or the more legitimate businesses and now duping people. So there are a lot of issues, to be honest. Let's face it. From the technical side, which is infrastructure stability, which giving time, these things will get there. These things will stabilize, right? The same way people are now used to my cousin. I'm used to my cousin being an agency banking person, right? Because I can see him, that trust is there. Over time, when people start to use services and they know that I take this one card or I take this one banking app and I go here and I pay, and I'm sure that it's going to work, there's no issues, right? When these things start to get more stable, it sort of solves the infrastructure side, right? But security, IT security is a big issue now, right? And the banks are facing it. I don't think it has anything to do with the size or even experience anymore. I think it's more or less how people are now thinking about IT security. So who should have access to the system? What kind of access should they have? I think it's now becoming top of mind. We've built so fast, and we built so many systems. Right now, everybody now has to start thinking about who is this one person, right? So can I tell who is accessing my system? Can I tell why they're accessing my system? In the event of an issue, can I really find this person and pick this person up and get the person to undo whatever damage that they have done? This person might be internal, this person might be a vendor, this person might be a customer, right? So security, I think, has now come full circle as that area that people need to look at. Stability is still there, but with better training, with time, to be honest, these systems will get a lot more stable, right? But security, both internal security as well as external, right? Who my customer is. Should this person really be having access to this particular account or even my bank as a whole, right? Who are they? Are they known to have done something nefarious somewhere else and they're trying to come into, our own infrastructure to do something similar? Or is this the kind of transaction I expect this person to be carrying out? Is it illicit or is it suspicious? So yeah.
Got it. I think you made that so many important points. I think if I summarize, it will just be about trust, right? There's trust about the system and stability. There's trust from a security perspective, like you mentioned just now, internal and external. And I would also say a big thank you to you, Benga, because of time. I'm going to go on to Ogo. And thank you for those insights. And like I said, if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A section. We'll take as many as we can. Benga is still on the call, and we would see if there are any questions for him specifically. So, like I mentioned, August on the call, she's my colleague. She's our sales director for Africa. We call her a superstar because of her wealth of experience engaging corporates across the continent. And ultimately, Benga has touched on a couple of important points over with respect to well, even though it's a misnomer, according to Benga, digital banking, where things are, where the good opportunities are. But what are the trends that you are seeing from your engagements with corporates across the continent? Are they consistent with what Benga has said? Are there other things that have come up in those engagements?
Absolutely. And thank you, DG. I mean, I'm taking straight off the bat from Winger's last comments. Like, this is also the trend that we are seeing from a KYC digital KYC provider perspective. So these are the trends that we are seeing. The statistics are showing that fraud attacks have increased by 50% year on year. Even though a large percentage of those fraud is still unsophisticated, but there's also a huge percentage of increased cyber attacks. We are also seeing trends around fraud, around liveness, around people being able to detect who they are, identity theft, and people impersonation. We're seeing a lot of that. Also, what we are noticing is, but on the positive side, we also see that remote onboarding and people being able to onboard from the comfort of their homes and from the comfort of their offices or wherever is also taking off. The biggest challenge also, remains, apart from, in a bit to sort of manage this, identity problem, is the fact that even the government databases are not foolproof, right? And people would want to rely on the government databases for reference and all of that, but they're not even spared from these attacks. And finally, the challenge for our clients also remain a full consolidation of all of these databases and all of these data sources. What is the one place that we can all trust, and the merchants can trust across countries, in Nigeria, in Kenya? What is that one database that everyone can trust? So those are the trends that we're seeing for the enterprise customers. And then again, it differs from mid-market to enterprise. But I feel like the real opportunity, especially for enterprise customers, is the fact that, remote account opening is taking off. This is mostly driven by the fintechs and, the smaller, the more nimble entities and all of that. And I feel like for the bigger entities and for the bigger enterprises, this is the real opportunity for them to take off. We also see the smaller guys wanting to scale across continents and looking for the required infrastructure that allows them to sit in Nigeria, onboard users from anywhere in the world, sit in Kenya, sit in Uganda, and onboard users anywhere in the world. So those are the trends that we see. And Minga is right. The cyber attacks are a problem. The security deficit in terms of even in people, fraud is growing and all of that. So those are the trends that we see from our merchant base.
Super. Thanks. So I think, and that's what MetaMap is here for, really, because ultimately, this is life that we live in terms of the cyber attack. And interesting, I was in a meeting a couple of days ago, and this was a big topic as well. And you even have at the national level where countries are attacking each other, cyber cell in the cyberspace. But ultimately, piggybacking off that point you mentioned in terms of, and again, going back to what Benga said about trust, that's the basic point. I want to trust that your platform, if I want to withdraw money or do a remittance or a transfer, is stable. I want to also be sure that my information is safe. Also, my money is safe, right? And linking it to what MetaMap does and what we can offer, how do we merge this conversation together to say these are the challenges, but again, these are the opportunities that, one, saves you cost, two, helps you scale, but three, most importantly, manages your strategy and your objectives. So how would you marry those two? What MetaMap has to offer in terms of product, services, and then to the risks that you have highlighted already?
Okay. Thanks, DG. So I mean that's pretty much what we do and pretty much what MetaMap is all about. First of all, we want to be able to connect, online strangers to businesses, and truly help businesses onboard the right type of people on their platform. We want to be able to help businesses scale all over the world at a very, very affordable cost. Wenger talked about the problem, the resource problem. We are seeing a lot of brain drain. We are seeing a lot of people leaving, especially when it comes to engineering capacity and engineering talent and resource. He talked about the problem of even proper documentation, building, and that handover. A lot of our clients have very, very lean. We're beginning to see a lot of clients say, hey, I don't even have anybody on my engineering team that can help do this. And that's what we're trying to solve, especially in low trust and low in emerging markets, where the problem of trust is really huge and really, really, really significant. But at the same time, we also want to help people scale across countries, scale across continents, and make sure that whoever it is that is coming on board your platform is really who they say they are. And we try to do this by connecting the multiple databases, both government databases and local databases, and of course leveraging our tech infrastructure to sort of do all when it comes to document verification, biometric verification, and all of that, AI technology, and all of that. So the whole idea is having a solution that is off the shelf, that allows you to just plug and play. You don't have to do so much in terms of building. Have a very an easy front end experience, an easy integration experience, and allows you to pretty much verify and allow people from all over the world come onto your platform without much hassle and without much integration issues.
Super. Well, very well said, Ogo. Thank you so much for that. Again, getting back to the theme of this conversation about actionable insights, looking into 2023. Like I said earlier, a lot of companies have already most likely shaped their strategy, most likely have shaped in budgets. Of course, everybody's trying to reduce costs, everybody's trying to increase revenues, and like you mentioned earlier, in terms of scale. So what can corporates also look forward? So I guess in two parts. One is that various people are in different stages in terms of growth or where they are with their infrastructure. Can MetaMap meet them where they are? So effectively, if I have maybe a few points, a few products already, can I add on versus me having to get a whole suite of products at the same time? And secondly, would be what can people look forward to as well in 2023 in terms of new products that are coming through from MetaMap?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that's the beauty of the MetaMap platform. It's really, really, very, very flexible. The flexibility of the platform is really, 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 really super. And we've continued to grow. We came into the market and we started out with mid markets, the smaller businesses and all of that, and we have gradually grown into enterprise, working with the banks, working out all the security issues that require for the banks, building that resilience that supports, enterprise organizations. So first of all, to your question, the platform is really, really flexible, really ubiquitous. I mean, you can cherry pick and choose whatever works for you, whatever you want, and then begin to add on as you grow. If you decide to go with the full suite, you can go with the full suite. But okay, I think my network went off for a bit. But yeah, the platform is super. Okay.
Okay, go on, I can hear you.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, I think Ogo drops off, but she will come back in. But I guess we're saying basically is that MetaMap can meet you where you are. Effectively, we call MetaMap because you can actually map your way basically the merits that you want, the product that you want, and ultimately, like I said, tailored to wherever your organization is and what you need. And maybe while Ogo is coming back in, it would be great to get Benga's thoughts on the whole digital KYC. I know you touched on that already in terms of onboarding and the need to do that digitally, because that's the only way to. But what has been your experience? Would you say it has made a difference in your business? And also customer feedback with respect to how they've experienced what VFD has to offer them.
Yes, it's definitely made a significant difference, right? And I think internally we even talk about how what we do is very different and even to a large extent more advanced than what your traditional banks do. So CBN's, and this is specific to Nigeria as an example, CBN's KYC AML framework says that if you're opening an account for somebody, a level 3 account means this person can do all the transactions that they need to do. You have to physically inspect all the documents that they have given you and validate that the person that's on this document and the person standing in front of you are the exact same people. Very often in banks, this doesn't happen, right? Because I go to a bank, I fill a form, I drop it at the bank, and my passport image is there and everything is there. And I get an email or a text message that my bank account has been opened, right? Where did that validation happen? Because the person who I gave the document to and the person who is back at the central processing unit or in operations opening the actual account, they are different people, right? So that person back end has to rely on the person front end. But what we do, as an example in VBank, is once you're signing up, we do a liveness check, right? Who is this person? Is this person alive? First of all, not that it's an image, so you're not taking a selfie of an image. So we actually check, is this person alive? That technology exists today. Is this person alive? Is this person the same person with all the documentation that they've given us? This documentation that you've also given us, is it real? We validate those IDs. Is this person wanted in maybe for terrorist financing or whatnot, right? So all of those checks are literally happening instantaneously. Back end, the customer doesn't know, the customer doesn't care. Everything happens instantaneously. I open the account within 2 minutes. I have an account. In that 2-minute period, we've validated your ID. We've checked that you're a real person. We've checked that you are the same person as the people that, or as the ID that we have. We've checked that you're not listed as someone that finances terrorism or by one of these agencies. And we've also validated if you're politically exposed, so that we can then start to track if there's any illicit funding or transaction. So we've done way more than what a traditional bank would have done in a very short space of time, and even more reliably than they would have done. So yeah, definitely.
Super. Thank you for that, Benga. And maybe back to your goal. You're back now. And also back what Benga said, right? Of course, he has experienced technology in terms of onboarding. Of course, I can assume that it translates to the customer experience and how, because it's easier to get your account open and to enjoy transactions. So with MetaMap, how many places across Africa can clients enjoy a similar experience?
All of Africa. And all of the rest of the world, actually. You can enjoy seamless experience end to end, just like just like Benga mentioned, with all of this suite of security checks. And again, we try to go into the nuances, following what are the regulations for the country. And MetaMap helps you not to think too much, because we spend time to think about the regulation and see how every country requires that its onboarding is supposed to be done. So pretty much all of Africa and the rest of the world, actually, because of course MetaMap is a global company. And I think that also gives opportunity for us, because there's a huge diaspora market, especially for banks, for fintechs and all of that. Nigeria has a huge diaspora community, and remittance continues, the remittance flow back into Nigeria continue to grow in millions and millions of dollars year on year. So, but in terms of government databases, I mean, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Uganda, and I think Tanzania were looking to move into that roadmap. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Oga. I think it's very clear. I think you did mention an opportunity there, and MetaMap is ready to partner with any institution that's ready to take on that challenge in terms of remittances. And there have been many people trying to solve that problem, and it's more of a cost problem, but rightly so. Like Benga has mentioned severally, there's a risk element. You don't want to be the company that is facilitating money laundering. It's clearly not something you want to do. Licensed or unlicensed, there are laws that will typically be required to be followed. And the MetaMap is there to support you in your journey to not just be compliant, but also do it efficiently from a cost perspective, but also in terms of reliability. Like Benga had mentioned, the infrastructure stability is super important. That for us is a focus or a focal point that we are sure that we have stability and again can deliver and meet you where you are in your journey to expand your markets, in your journey to serve your customers better, in your journey to be more efficient from a cost perspective. And I think we have a few questions from our participants. I will just perhaps give the opportunity now to take one or two of those questions. And the first question, and this is probably going to go to, I would like to get Benga's thoughts first on this. And the question is around consumer protection, especially from the fintech space. Again, what are the steps that various companies or fintechs are taking to protect consumers of their various digital products, right? There's also the fact that banks have a strong KYC and other measures during onboarding. Do fintechs rely on banks and other traditional institutions to help them in this regard, or do you basically do that on your own? So maybe from your experience, Benga, how do you see consumer protection? How you put things in place to protect the consumer that enjoys your products, but also in terms of KYC, do you rely on traditional banks or via partnership, or you kind of already touched on that, how you do that, or VBank does that itself?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Deji. So, unfortunately, I can't speak for all fintechs, right? I can only speak for VBank, right, and how we do these things. I can try and speculate on what other people do, but to a large extent, I can only speak intelligently about what VBank does. So, we're a bank. I think it's important to also start out with that. We are a bank licensed and regulated by CBN, who wields the big stick. So if we step out of line, we get smacked back into line, right? So we don't rely on a traditional bank because we have direct access as a bank from CBN. And regarding consumer protection, I mean, there are so many laws that are in place. I think a lot of people don't realize, right? There's the NDPR, which is the data protection regulation for Nigeria, which is administered or enforced by NITDA. So every year we have to go through an exercise where we show how we've protected people's data and ensured privacy as well. A lot of this information is also available in our terms and use, how we would use this data, what we would use this data for, and essentially that we will not share the data without your permission. I think it's important that people also, which is where regulation comes into play to a large extent, or licensing comes into play. If you're working with a fintech, it always helps to check if they're supported by a regulated institution, and more importantly, how they are supported by this regulatory institution, right? Because I can set up an MMM tomorrow, and because the bank account is in XYZ Bank, I can claim that I have I'm in partnership with XYZ Bank, but it's not the same thing, because XYZ Bank is like, well, we're just collecting money from this person as a normal customer, right? It's not when there's no partnership or legal obligation in place, right? So I know a number of fintechs actually explicitly states the nature of the relationship, and for the guys that we partner with and offer them licensing support, it's actually explicitly stated to what extent that licensing support covers, right? So for data privacy in general, there are regulations that state if you feel that there's been a breach in some way or the other, you can actually seek redress, either via NITA or even via the FCCPC, which is also now within, it's a consumer protection part of CBN as well. I hope I answered the question.
I believe you did. And to the person who asked the question, please drop a comment on the chat if you want to get additional details. But I think Mega touched on very important points. I think MetaMap are also very conscious about consumer protection, and from our perspective, because there's the elements of ensuring that we work and partner with people who comply with regulations. We ourselves comply with global standards in terms of data protection and cybersecurity. So that's a very valid point, because for us, like we said, our mission really is to open up the borders so there's growth, of course, off the back of data. So if data is not secure, there's no growth for anyone. So that's a very, very, very important point. And thank you, Benga, for answering that very, very nicely. And I have another question. This is more for Ogo, really, in terms of how quickly, how easy it is to be onboarded, to engage MetaMap in terms of getting some of the products. How long does it take to go through integration? How long does it take to start enjoying that based on, I guess, your assessment of where the client is?
Yeah, thanks, Gigi. Again, this would differ from clients to clients. It will also it will sort of differ in terms of the services that they're looking to take from MetaMap. Now, if you're taking the full suite, that would be different. If you're just cherry picking, that would be different. It's also dependent on the availability of resources, but especially from the client side of things. And again, the type of integration that you're doing, be it SDK or API, would also determine how long. But by and large, if everything is equal, like if all things are equal and resources are there, and all sides are clear. On our own side, SDKs usually take what now? We've had clients go live in 24 hours, plugging into our system. APIs take a bit longer, about 2 weeks if everything is equal. But typically on a 30-day timeline, again, depending on the scale and on the size of the project. For enterprise customers, there's end-to-end security that needs to be done, testing, stress tests, and all of that. But if all things were equal and all things on our own side, well, you should be up and running in 30 days.
Fantastic. So I like the point that you mentioned. Again, it's tailored to the entity where they are, and I like how you mentioned stress testing, because for us it's about delivering quality and ensuring. Back to the point about stability, that was is extremely important. And I guess if I ask a follow-up question, there's also support, right? What's the experience like in terms of post-integration support? How does that work over?
Yeah, I think this is one of the strongest. I've worked in a lot of software companies before joining MetaMap, but I think this is one of our strongest suites, our strongest areas. The support is again, because we're a global company, we have a support team sitting everywhere in the world, so we have that 24/7 support. Every client has a dedicated success team, a dedicated success manager that takes care of you post integration. I think this is one of the things, and I think this is one of the things that really helped us in the market. We have a problem of customer service in Nigeria. We do have a problem of customer service, and I think that's where the differentiating factor and that MetaMap brings in. So support is 24/7 because we're a global team. We have people sitting all over the world, and then every client has a dedicated team. So a success team, dedicated to their accounts, managing that account and ensuring that they have, that optimum and good service from MetaMap.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ogo. I think I just check again from the chat if there are other questions. But I think, thank you, Lucinda. You have confirmed that Minga answered your questions very well. So we're glad that was sorted. And maybe if I, and again, this doesn't end here. If you have any other questions, we're happy to take them after this meta chat. I will try to do our meta chat as often as possible. And thank you for being here. We'll definitely let you know when our next one is. But again, if you have any other questions around the actionable insights, and if I summarize actually very quickly what we've talked about today, it's the fact that there's opportunity, right? Despite the challenges, despite the risk, but it's how we then execute that matters, who you partner with, who you work with. And from a banking perspective, it's all about the customer. Like being as example about agency banking, I find that very, very interesting because there's a manual element in code to it because you have to still see somebody physically, but it's powered by innovation, it's powered by infrastructure, it's powered by a POS machine in some cases, but also a network and a technology that drives that. And it's also, again, a way to include people financially. And if I think about MetaMap again, our driving force is that there are a lot of people who do not have access, and that's facts, right? I know some countries in Africa struggle with having to queue several times for visas. It's about access. So data effectively can change the access game, and that's what we are trying to play. And it's very important that each business, each organization thinks about it from that perspective to say, how can I reach the unreached? How can I bank the unbanked? And find a partner that can help you get there in terms of, like I said, I also mentioned connections to government databases, but also as simple as being able to confirm the person is alive. And it goes beyond onboarding. There's also just a regular transaction life cycle to be sure that if, for example, someone's pattern changes, you can reconfirm that this is the person that we say they are. There's been no compromise. There's been no funny behavior, as it were, or someone who has not become rogue or gone rogue. Also helps you to sanitize your institution. And like Benga mentioned, you don't want to get the issues from the regulator. So ultimately, it's a value chain conversation. It's not just at onboarding, but also as we go on from a transaction management perspective. And you can also set the controls that you want to say, for example, if you find a transaction above a certain limit, I want to reconfirm via biometrics. And that's all of a few seconds because it's literally on the person's phone and that's already connected to your workflow. So again, there's so many use cases, so many iterations, and we're happy to have more detailed conversations with you as you reach out to us. Again, it will be tailored to where you are as a business and where you seek to go. And we believe that a lot of you want to grow, not just locally in Nigeria or whatever country that you are coming from, you're calling from, but also across the continent. So again, we are here to support you. And if you have any more questions or you want to schedule a meeting, we are here to definitely have that with you. And you can also reach out to one of my colleagues, Joyce Gital. Her details will be put in the chat very soon. You can send an email and she will definitely schedule a conversation with you. So again, we are happy to engage further to again tailor the conversation to where you are. And before we wrap up, I think we are almost out of time. Just to check if Benga or Ogo have any final words. Benga, maybe I'll start with you. Do you have any final words? Again, back to actionable insight. What should people do? How should people respond or proactively respond to 2023? Benga, very quickly.
Thanks, Deji. So I think going into 2023, I know the political landscape in Nigeria, globally, the recession, the Russian-Ukraine crisis, and all of that is affecting things. But I think people should continue to embrace digital because not only does it make things a lot faster, it makes things a lot more efficient, to be honest. And please download VBank. Support us on our journey as well, right? And I'm pretty sure we have one of the best customer experience structures in the market. And I like the fact that you mentioned customer service is really key. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Benga. I really, really appreciate your being here and your comments. Ogo, any final words from you?
Yeah, I mean, just to say thanks to Wenga for doing us the honors, and thanks to everyone that joined the call. I think we're a very resilient bunch. We're a very resilient country. We're a very resilient continent. And even though the forecast in terms of all economic indices, it's looking very grim. But this is where we are a country that innovates in adversity. Like we it's almost like we thrive in adversity, and we're looking forward to 2023 and partnering with all our companies and leading them on that journey, and being with them on that journey, and helping them with that infrastructure that they need to succeed. So that's pretty much it for me. Thank you.
Super. Well said, Ogo. Thank you so much. And I have been Deji Amon. I realized I didn't tell you my name earlier. My name is Deji Amon, and I work at MetaMap. Surprise, surprise. I manage data partnerships for West Africa. It's been a pleasure having you all on the call on our Meta Chats today. Like I said earlier, we will definitely have more of these, and we'll encourage that you please join us for our subsequent events. So once again, we are so grateful. Thank you so much. And like I said earlier, if you have any questions, you want to share on the call, my colleague's email address is already in the chat, joyce.gitao@metamap.com. And we would be happy to schedule the call to discuss further with you. Also, again, we are grateful that you're here. I wish you the very best of the day. And if we don't see you until the new year, happy holidays and happy new year in advance. So once again, thank you for joining. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Cheers, everyone.